Secrets of the Pharaohs. 5 mysteries that still confuse the world. Despite thousands of years, the ancient Egyptian civilization continues to inspire the whole world, especially since many of its secrets remain elusive to scientists and researchers, who are trying to decipher them to this day. Over the years, the land of hieroglyphics and sacred cats has been a rich source of research, but there is still a lot to learn. Here are some things that are still inexplicable. How did Tutankhamun die? When you hear the name King Tut, what do you picture? For many it's his golden death mask, which was found covering his head when his sarcophagus was opened. Today King Tut is a household name synonymous with discovery and exploration, so it's hard to believe there was a time when we knew so little about him, including how he died. For thousands of years the events surrounding his death were a mystery, and after the discovery of King Tut's tomb in 1922 interest in what killed the boy king was renewed. It makes sense when you consider what was already known, a young leader of a powerful country, dead at only 19 years old. Of course, this would lead to questions and speculation. Was King Tut assassinated? Was he murdered and overthrown? The world was captivated, and we had to know. Although the theories range from strange to dramatic, scholars and scientists who study Tut's life have discredited a lot of them due to a lack of evidence. One popular example was the idea that he had been killed by a blow to the head after bone fragments were found in his skull. This theory was discredited after it was determined that the damage could have been caused by poor handling of his mummified body. Just because his death doesn't involve a plot or conspiracy doesn't make the actual theory any less exciting. A CT scan performed by an international team of scientists in 2006 found that the young king had indeed suffered a fracture in his thigh bone. They also found traces of the embalming resin used during the mummification process within the fracture, meaning that the fracture occurred before his death, not after. The result? The scientists concluded that the most likely cause of death was from infection or disease caused by this fracture. With no antibiotics around to treat him, the proud pharaoh perished. King Tutankhamun may be one of the most famous pharaohs, despite his young death. But the answer to the question, how did he die, remains unclear. In 2013, a group of British researchers released a documentary titled Tutankhamun, The Mystery of the Burned Mummy, in which they based their analysis on X-ray images taken of his mummy in 1968, along with CT scans conducted by the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt in 2005. The film revealed that he had suffered significant damage to his ribs, along with a broken leg, leading the team to conclude that Tut most likely died from a chariot accident. National Geographic pointed to other possibilities, saying that it is possible that a kick from a horse pulling a chariot was the cause of his death. Another theory from National Geographic indicated that an attack by a hippopotamus may have been the cause of death. Apart from animals, other researchers believe that the mystery of the disappearance of some of the king's ribs is due to thieves from the World War II era stealing them to reach valuable beads that were on his chest. Another theory put forward by the head of the Italian Institute for Mummies, Professor Albert Zink, after relying on 2,000 computer scans and DNA testing of Tut's family, said that Tut was in a chariot accident, almost impossible. Zink believed that Tut may have died because his body was weak, as his father and mother were brothers. Where is the grave of Alexander the Great? Few people have come closer to ruling the entire known world, at the time, than Alexander the Great, and yet, for such a famous man, no one knows where he is buried. The Journal of Archaeology published 2 articles by Robert Bianchi in 1993 and 1995 about the search for Alexander the Great's grave, and found there was never supposed to be a grave at all, because Alexander wanted to be thrown into the Euphrates River upon his death in 323 BC, so that his followers would believe that he had disappeared and ascended to heaven to be with his Father. However, his generals chose to bury him instead, and he is supposed to have ended up buried in 3 places, the first of which was in Memphis, the capital of the Old Kingdom in Egypt. During the 4th or 3rd century BC, it was moved to a new tomb in Alexandria, and later, it was given a new tomb in Alexandria as well. It is likely that the tomb was damaged and vandalized at some point, and now there is no part of the tomb or even Alexander's body, and no one knows what happened to it. The historian narrates that in 1889, the English Egyptologist Wallace Budge suggested that the body of Alexander the Great was immersed in a large vat of honey until it was transported in a funeral chariot over a period of 2 years from Babylon to Egypt, while the Greek historian Plutarch mentioned that the body was subjected to a group of Egyptian embalmers, and Alexander's body was placed in a golden coffin that was suitable for the body according to the Greek historian Theodore Siculus. While the coffin was placed on a majestic chariot drawn by horses. The golden coffin was later replaced with a crystal one, and possession of the body remained a subject of dispute between the leaders Perdiccas, Ptolemy I Soter and Seleucus I Nicator. Perdiccas wanted to transfer the body to be buried under his authority in Macedonia, but while the procession was passing through Syria, Ptolemy I Soter intercepted it and diverted the procession to Egypt, where it was buried in Memphis, in order to fulfill the prophecy of the Greek soothsayer, Ristander, Alexander's favorite soothsayer, who predicted that the country in which his body was buried would be the most prosperous in the world. What happened to Queen Nefertiti? Nefertiti is one of the most famous queens of Egypt, and she ruled for years alongside Pharaoh Akhenaten, until she disappeared. After 1336 BC, there is no information about what happened to her, as there is not even a tomb or mummy for her, which constituted a mystery, especially in light of the precision of the ancient Egyptians in dealing with the dead. One theory written by the History website says that she became a guardian of the throne with Akhenaten and changed her name to Neferneferuiten, while another theory said that she disguised herself as a man and changed her name to Smenkhare, especially since he was the 11th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, and one of the most mysterious figures in ancient Egyptian history. But these theories currently have nothing to support them other than these names coming later in the royal timeline, and Nefertiti no longer appears anywhere at all. In 2015, Egypt's Minister of Antiquities announced that an additional chamber, or 2, may have been found in King Tut's tomb, and one of these chambers may end up in Nefertiti's crypt. If that happens, researchers may finally be able to work out when she died, and if any of the artwork in the crypt suggests whether she seized power in her own right, was somehow murdered, or simply disappeared into an unknown post-royal life. What's with the painful expression on the face of the unknown man? Some mummies appear to be screaming, which isn't surprising since they didn't scream but rather had their mouths open during special ceremonies, in order to facilitate eating, drinking, and breathing in the afterlife, as was believed. However, there is one mummy in particular that actually appears to be screaming, and in extreme pain, and no one knows for sure why. According to National Geographic, this mummy was discovered in 1886, and it immediately stood out because the deceased appeared to be screaming in pain. Theories abound about how he died, with some researchers believing he may have been poisoned, or perhaps buried alive. Others believe he was a murdered Hittite prince, although archaeologist Bob Breyer of Long Island University is skeptical, saying, "They wouldn't mummify this guy if they killed him, they would just get rid of the body." A 2008 analysis of the so-called unknown man suggested he may have been Prince Pentwar, who was executed for plotting to kill his father, Pharaoh Ramses III, according to the Grange. If true, it would explain how he was buried, as he was wrapped in cowhide, meaning he had done bad things in his life, according to veteran Egyptologist Zahi Hawass. It could also explain why his grave was unmarked and he would not be able to join the afterlife, the worst possible punishment for an ancient Egyptian, and why his mummification was not done properly. But these are just theories without DNA testing. What was the original name of the Sphinx? For centuries, we knew nothing about the Sphinx, until 1817, when all that could be seen was its head peeking out of layers of sand. Since then, thanks to the efforts of archaeologists, there is an idea of who built it, Pharaoh Khafre, how it was done. Hundreds of workers worked for a fee and used huge blocks of nearby limestone, and how long it took, based on the copper and stone tools they used, perhaps about 3 years if 100 people worked on it. But the real name of the Sphinx remains a mystery to this day, because the Greek term, Sphinx, did not exist when Khafre built his monument. Egyptologist James Allen said in this regard that it is believed that the name Bob was given to the Sphinx by the construction workers.